Secretary Becky Feng to do the roll call.
President Rosario,
Here.
Director Corbett,
Here.
Director Coffey.
Here.
Okay, and members of the public members of staff participating in this meeting include Carol Victor, Dr. Ana Alvarez, Christina Kelchner, Catherine Dudney, Matthew James, Rachel Arbios, Ruby Tumber, and of course we have Sydney from PrimeGov assisting us at this time. Okay, today's Board Executive Committee meeting is held in accordance with Governor Newsom's executive order, allowing for board members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We are providing live audio and video streaming. Members of the public can provide public comments 3 ways: live via Zoom, submitting an email, or leaving a voicemail as noted on the agenda. This information can be found on the agenda, which is posted on the Park District's website at ebparks.org. If the committee members do not have any questions, we can begin.
Excellent. With that, we will have start with item number 2, discussion regarding potential increase in board compensation for attendance at a compensable meeting of the board. And I believe we have one public comment. What's the pleasure of the committee members? Do you want to hear public comments first or after our discussion?
First is fine with me.
Okay. You concur, Director Coffey?
Yeah, unless there's any thought to the public wanting to hear any staff presentation before they publicly comment.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Do we have a staff presentation?
I do, and it will be brief, and I can get that now if.
Sure, let's do that.
Okay, Carol Victor, Interim General Manager / District Counsel. So this item is discussion regarding potential increase in board compensation. In 2018, a bill was signed into law that made changes to compensation for the Board of Directors for public agencies, including the East Bay Regional Park District. This allowed the Board of Directors to increase the amount of compensation they receive for attending compensable meetings of the board by up to 5% annually. Previously, compensation was set by statute and could only be increased by the legislature. So in essence, the legislature got out of setting compensation rates for certain local agencies. As set forth in the law, board compensation may be increased not to exceed 5% for each calendar year following the operative date of the last adjustment. In July 2019, the board adopted an ordinance providing for a 5% increase in board compensation from $100 per compensable meeting to $105 per compensable meeting, and not to exceed a maximum of 10 compensable meetings in a calendar month. This increase, the board should note, was the first increase in close to 30 years that the board had received in compensation. The board wishes to increase the compensation for attending compensable meetings. We're requesting direction, which is we can move forward at this time with a 5% increase. In the staff report, it says it would go from 105 to 110. It would actually go from 105 to 110.25. So it would be a $5.25 increase. Or we could wait until July, which would be 2 calendar years since the last increase, and adopt an increase that would be a 10% increase. And under the ordinance, we have to follow under the law, we would have to adopt an ordinance. We have to publish notice of the hearing in the newspaper, hold a public hearing. And once the board takes action, the ordinance only becomes effective after 60 days. So if we took action in July of this year, for example, the compensation would not take effect until September. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? No questions?
Okay, I have a question. So Carol, we can skip a year and take no action on an increase in the stipend, but the following year, in effect, make up for that?
You can. Yeah,
So to take it even further, if we went 5 years without changing the board stipend, we could 5 years later raise it 25% or something like that.
you could.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and you have discretion in terms of whether you want to do it for each calendar year, whether you want to just do 5%. You know, the board always has discretion, but you are able to increase it for each calendar year that's passed since the last increase. And reviewing, since we're following under the water code, I reviewed a lot of other water agencies ordinance regarding compensation, and they do sometimes increase by 10% or 15%.
And they,
Go ahead, Director Corbett.
they've done that since this law was passed?
Well, this was always in the water code. So this was how water agencies could increase their compensation. What the legislature did when they adjusted the 5500 section of the Public Resources Code, they referred us to the California Water Code. So we followed that procedure. And because we adopt ordinances a little bit differently than water agencies do. So what we've done as your attorneys is we follow both statutes for adopting an ordinance. So we publish, our statutory scheme says that ordinances become effective immediately and that they have to be published once after they're adopted. The water code says you publish a notice before and then hold a public hearing, and then it becomes effective after 60 days. So we've just combined the two ordinances. So we're complying with both statutes when we adopt this.
The only other thing I would say is I think that, thank you for bringing it to the executive board. I think that this is one of those issues where it would be good to hear from the entire board at the same time. And I think it would also be helpful to have some information about what other local special district compensation is for their board members. Under this new law, the Ober-Nolte law, we have the benefit of seeing also how various boards earn their pay as well. In other words, there's two resolutions that have to be passed, not just the compensation one, but also the description of duties. So I think that that would be helpful, just to take a look at what some of the other boards have done. I think it is important also to recognize that there has not been a raise, and there was one 2 years, I guess 2 years ago in July, but hadn't been one for a while, and the cost of living has changed in the Bay Area, I would say a bit over the last few years. So I think that that's important to recognize too, but I'd really like to hear the full discussion of the board, as opposed to making a recommendation to them and then, having a completely different outcome perhaps. And also too, I'm not questioning you, but it does seem interesting that we can skip a year and move ahead. So those are things that would be important to me to have some background information. And also, if it's not too hard to do, I know often we don't even hit the 10 meeting mark. So board members are often compensated much less than 10 times whatever the amount is, 105 right now. But I'm wondering why we set it at 10. I wonder if it makes sense to set it maybe at 12, just based on, some board members, because of their responsibilities, like the board president, does more. So I'm just wondering if maybe we could just have some background on that, why we set it at that, and whether that's a potential too. But as you know, it can be very different depending on the month. Someone may not get any compensation. Someone might get compensation for 2 meetings. Someone may have 50 meetings, but they're split up between 4 days. So, there's lots of variables. So it doesn't really reflect hours put into the position. So anyway, I just tossed those things out for people to know what the life of a board member is like.
So, and Director Corbett, I think that if, for the hours that the board puts in versus your compensation, you are the lowest hourly wage earners within the Park District, I think. And it's a tremendous commitment being on this board of directors. The 10 meetings per month are is set by statute, that's the maximum that you can be compensated for. And the board will recall in December we made findings of what it takes and the number of meetings that the board has to attend as a director. And those findings are required for any agency that wants to compensate for more than 5 meetings in a month.
Okay. Is the 10 meetings the same statute, the Obernolte statute, or is that a different statute?
The 10 meetings has been in the 5500 section of the Public Resources Code, and that's been that's been in there for, I believe, almost 30 years. The maximum of 10 meetings, and it was the East Bay Regional Park District is specifically authorized to compensate for up to 10 meetings. Not all 5,500 districts have that authorization.
Okay. But it would be good to get the background info, what other boards make.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can use the same jurisdictions we look at for compensating employees.
Certainly.
Director Coffey, anything else to offer?
No, thank you.
Okay. Let's hear from our public comment.
Okay, we have Kelly Abreu. Kelly, we are going to, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Okay. Thanks. This is a great example of it. If you ask the wrong questions, you're going to get the wrong answers. The question being posed today is something about compensation for board meeting. And the question that I asked a year and a half ago was median compensation and benefits for boards and commissions. Those are two different questions. Total compensation benefits, that's posted on the website of whatever, it's posted on the web. So for BART, it's 40,000. It was at that time. I haven't updated my little study. $40,000 per year. But I pulled up my study. I'm sure all of you have forgotten about it by now. East Bay Mud and San Ramon City Council were in the upper 30s, $38,000 per year or so. AC Transit, Fremont City Council, Hayward Area Recreation Park District, and Washington Hospital Healthcare System were in the 20s, $20,000 to $28,000 a year of median compensation and benefits for the boards. And the East Bay Regional Park District proudly bringing up the rear at $7,000 per year, which is probably 4 times less than the average of the other boards. And by the way, when you talk about the 5 years, that's a mathematical error. When you're looking at exponential growth, you have to do compounding. You have to remember the compounding. So if you had a 5-year jump with 5% a year, it'd be 27.6%. You would take, and the way you do that math is you take 1.05 and you raise it to the 5th power. So what I'm telling this board is, you should not be comparing yourself to meeting compensation. You should be looking at total compensation for everybody, whatever everybody else is doing. And you're probably doing more work than these other guys are doing also, by the way, but let's not get into that here. You need to find a way to quadruple your compensation, total compensation and benefits. And quadrupling it is not going to happen by, also, if you do piecework by paying by meeting, which is what you're doing, you're going to have this incentive to increase your meetings or go to more meetings or whatever. It's going to be, you have a piecework incentive. Everybody else doesn't get paid by piecework, obviously. They're getting paid by a flat rate. And this piecework system is really a very bad idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Kelly. So it sounds like, do we need a motion to, go ahead, Carol.
No, I don't think you need a motion. What we needed was direction and what I'm hearing. So instead of coming forward with an ordinance before the board to increase compensation, to come forward with a staff report providing some additional background to the board, some comparisons as to what the compensation is in other public agencies, and then getting direction from the full board if they want to move forward with an ordinance. I believe that was the direction.
Yes, that sounds good. I see a nod of heads.
And I have one more question too. That sounds good. I'm assuming that, oh, I'm sorry, I should wait to be recognized.
Oh, go ahead, Director Corbett.
I know you're the president. Sorry about that. The one thing I would ask, it's more a process question. I'm assuming, obviously under statute, we have certain restrictions as to the timing of these measures and when they're enacted. So my question is, looking towards the future, would we be able to, I think I know the answer to this question, would we be able to set a discussion on an item like this in advance of its enactment? In other words, say we had discussion in December to enact in February, for example.
Mhm.
And that way we would also be able to take into consideration that 60 days upon the resolution being enacted. So in other words, we don't keep pushing our 12 months, 2 more months ahead, 2 more months ahead, 2 more months ahead. So maybe we could, if we do this again, we could pre-plan, taking into recognition the various time limitations imposed.
So I think Director Corbett, it's funny that you said this. Is exactly almost word for word a conversation that I had with my staff about because of the 60-day. So I think where we landed, which was the let's say the board wants to move forward with a 10% increase from the last increase. Then you would take that action. In July, so it becomes effective in September. We can look of what I don't know that there's anything that says you have to take it exactly 60 days. Can you take it 75 days earlier and make sure it doesn't get enacted until a full calendar year has passed? We'll look into that precisely. I don't think that there's necessarily a problem with doing that. So it should be, the board could look at this. So you're considering, if the board so desired, you were looking at increases at 12 months apart. So that the next increase would take effect 12 months from when the last one took effect.
And you could pass an ordinance that had the language to become effective 60 days from now, for example.
Yes, yes, the statute requires us to that when we pass it, it has to be that it becomes effective in 60 days.
Yes, but you would time it so the board action was 60 days before the 60 days as opposed to 60 days after. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yes,
Within the-
yes.
yeah.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think the only question I have is, I think that the board has to, the board needs to take out, you could not pass an ordinance in, let's say in 2021, saying what you were going to do for 2022, 2023, 2024. So that's the only caution with regards to that. But yes, we can time this so that that you're not losing 60 days of compensation each time you adopt the ordinance. If I'm understanding your comment.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about working within the language of the rules. So yeah, something like that.
Okay.
Great. I know, just my comment is that, yes, this is a labor of love to be on this board. And, but I also recognize that I think the district is limiting itself to a number of good candidates who would be excellent board members, but because of their work situation, can't either afford it or can't find the time. So I think this will be a good discussion for the full board. So Looking forward to it.
All right, so we will, it probably won't be the first meeting in February, but we'll bring it back for discussion at the second meeting in February for full board discussion to get direction on whether the board would like us to move forward with a 5% increase or wait until July and move forward with a 10% increase, or if the board doesn't choose to move forward at all would be another option.
Okay, great. Sounds like a sequel.
I'm sorry.
Sounds like sequel.
Yeah, it is. And I'm actually sort of having an out-of-body experience listening to me and going, oh, I sound like an attorney. So, anyway, only statutes that an attorney could love.
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
And then on to item number 3, 2021 Performance Plan Overview. Dr. Ana Alvarez.
Thank you so much, President Rosario. Good afternoon, board members, esteemed colleagues, and members of the public. Deputy General Manager, Dr. Ana Alvarez, at your service. It is a beautiful day to deliver the mission of the East Bay Regional Park District, and I'm delighted to join you on this special day. The item before you is a review of the Park District's public commitment for this calendar year in the form of a performance plan for 2021. Catherine, if you don't mind putting up the screen and we can start the presentation. Thanks. This performance plan is published as part of our operating budget, and it serves as the annual work plan for the Park District, which is comprised of the projects and initiatives that the Park District will pursue and dedicate funds and or extensive staff time to meet the goals identified in the master plan. And in the interest of the public we serve, the people who deliver every day its mission, our human resource, as well as the public lands that we steward. Next slide. I will be joined today by Ms. Catherine Dundee, Management Analyst in the General Manager's Office, who will be presenting highlights from 2020 as a way of background to understanding what is ahead for us in 2021's performance plan. I will be providing some context on its framework, on how we make the nexus to the board director's priorities and interests as identified in the annual board workshops. Catherine, if you don't mind joining me at this time. Oh, and of course, there's one more slide here. There's certainly in how we do our work, it's important to recognize that the Park District conducts its work based on a framework of values. This really speaks to not only how we do our work, but how we treat each other and how we treat the public at large. And if with your concurrence, I would like to take a moment to go over these values, which is a good reminder for all of us as we embark on the business of the board, as well as the mission delivery for the district. We have made a commitment as an organization that we will honor the land that we steward, each other, and the park visitors we serve by engaging respectfully. We also understand that we have to creatively adapt to change. We address challenges with empathy, perspective, and determination, which speaks to the value of resiliency. And also we understand that our greatest strength lies in the trust, accountability, and teamwork we cultivate with our colleagues, partners, and the public we serve. The Park District benefits from beautiful relationships, and we lean on those relationships to be able to move forward our mission. Additionally, we also understand that we must communicate openly, honestly, and reliably because we want to be responsive not only to each other, but the people that we serve. And in order to maintain the public's trust, we do so through meaningful stakeholder engagement and unfettered and access to timely and reliable information on decisions and performance. And we bring the values at this point because today we're going to be speaking precisely on delivering performance and discussing at a public meeting, how do we measure this performance and what are we tracking? What are those public commitments? Catherine, would you like to join?
All right, thank you. Catherine Dudney, Management Analyst. I'm going to go over the few highlights from 2020. This will be brief because the Executive Committee last year at mid-year got an update about the 2020 performance plan, but there are a few notable accomplishments to note. Even with COVID and all of the things that happened in the past year, there were a number of really significant projects to get completed and to open. Here's just a few. The Golden Gate Fields Bay Trail segment, as well as the Bay Point Restoration Project, and opening of the John Sutter Shoreline, all really significant projects to improve our public access. And this was ongoing at the same time where we were transitioning to digital virtual meetings. We changed our programming to be virtual as well. And we're interacting with the public to make sure that our parks were safe for the public and our employees through signage and various communication platforms. Just a few numbers from the 2020 plan that you may be interested in. We have 47 performance indicators. So these are just, let's see, 6 of those. Our police satisfaction rate being 89%, we had a target of 75%. I thought this was really remarkable given the discussions around police this year and the way that police was demonstrated in the news. To have a really high satisfaction score from the public about our police service, I thought was really exceptional. We acquired over $1 million in funds for acquisition from outside sources. This was 10 times the goal of 100,000, really exceptionally exceeding our goal. We have launched implicit bias training for all employees. This was 93% as of last week, but we have a makeup session this week. So we anticipate this being closer to 100% by the end of the week. This was a 4-hour training and, really important for moving our diversity, equity, inclusion objectives forward. We continue to do fuels management, and we exceeded our goals in the vegetation clearing that we did this year in spite of COVID. We added over 5,000 COVID signs that had to be designed and produced and installed in the parks. That was a new work item that got added at mid-year. That was not part of the original plan, but got added. And then even though our in-person schools were really limited, we were still able to reach almost 20,000 school children through our virtual programs and some of our in-person programs before shelter in place started. So still really having a lot of value in the community as well. I thought it was worth looking at 2020 in comparison to 2019, noting that 2019 was maybe a more typical year for the Park District. In 2019, we completed 93% of the performance objectives that we had identified for that year, noting that we had 100 total objectives. In our original 2020 plan, we had 90 objectives. And what I try to do here is in the kind of hashed coloration that looks a little bit darker red. Those are the projects that in our notes would have been on target had it not been for COVID-19. So COVID-19 delayed our resources, delayed the project or rerouted resources so that those projects were not prioritized and ended up getting delayed. And most of those will roll over into our 2021 plan. The 4 projects that are noted in the brighter red, those are the ones that were not affected by COVID-19. They were delayed or stopped for something else like a regulatory permit. So if you sort of consider that, we think that we would have been similar to 2019 had we been able to not have COVID-19 sort of redirect our work. The last bar on the right-hand side is our 2020 with mid-year. We added 16 additional performance objectives at mid-year to try to account for some of this new work that we were doing. And I'll have another slide about those, but you can see how that influences our success rate on our performance objectives that were completed. So again, 16 new objectives were added at mid-year. All of these were completed. They were really focused on, a lot of them were focused on employee and public safety. You can see down at the bottom, the little blue person icon, that's our icon for attracting and retaining a diverse workforce of excellence. So we had a lot of new objectives in in 2020 mid-year related to how we keep our employees safe and communicate with them during this time. We expanded again a lot of our technology use by launching a new internal SharePoint site, having all of our meetings go virtual, including this board meeting that we're having today, and launching this new training system for employees. And these technology advances will really be with us for many years to come. So it got accelerated during this time, but are really things that we're going to continue to have. New communication channels include our COVID-19 labor task force, as well as things like our Nixle alert system that got advanced because of the COVID-19 pandemic. That's what I had on the 2020 plan. I'm going to talk a little bit about how these roll over into the 2021 plan.
Catherine, if I may, maybe we can pause a little bit. Are there any questions from committee members on the 2020 highlights?
Anybody have any questions? I have a couple.
Okay. Do you want me to pull the screen up for a second?
Yeah, great. One, and thank you for this presentation. It's very detailed and clear too. One thing I wanted to focus in on is transparency, and especially when it comes to numbers. And then I'm looking at the 19,263 school children we've served. Do we know which schools they're coming from, and do we know the demographic makeup of those attendees? I think it's extremely important that we keep track of those. And Dr. Alvarez, you know that I have an outstanding request from October for those numbers, and I think it's extremely important, especially now that both the PAC, our Park Advisory Committee, and our Regional Parks Foundation are asking for the same information. And so I just want to make sure that from here on in that we are tracking those demographics, who we're serving, so that our public and the board knows that we're hitting the right targets.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry. Yes, thank you, Director Rosario. We recently engaged in a conversation with AGM O'Connor, as well as AGM Carol Johnson in Public Affairs, with the participation of our Interim General Manager, Carol Victor, to understand how to best expedite a response to you that's outstanding. We recognize that, as I shared with you in the past, the district has not tracked demographical data on the public that we serve through the visitor centers or the interpretation and recreation programs. That's not to say that there's a lack of interest to understand that data, but rather we will be looking at how do we move forward in the future, as you referenced, to embed best management practices in program management that calls for those specific systems in place where we can track very specific demographical data that can then be aligned to outcome-based programming. What are we looking for, and what are we as indicators, right? Mm-hmm. And we also, but you should know, as I share with you, that while we may not necessarily track right now that data in our registration of our programs, we understand the school children that we're serving through programs like Park Express, or perhaps school visits at our visitor centers. We understand, and we have where the schools that are coming to our facilities, and we have access through census data on the demographical profile of the school population. And that's the nexus that we're making to have a general understanding of who's actually coming to our programs. And this item is a priority for our AGM of Operations, who provides management oversight of interpretation and recreation. So we're going to be focusing on that certainly as part of 2021, and certainly as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion community impact assessment, because that's what we're looking for. What is the impact that we're having in being able to understand who we're serving, what the impact is, and how are we making those decisions for mission delivery for the district?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Appreciate everyone's efforts on that question. So, all right. Any other questions? And then we may go forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, am I back up?
Yes.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. All right, so as I mentioned, we have 47 indicators and 100 objectives that are distributed across 8 goals. Now, these 8 goals were pulled from the master plan about 5 years ago. 2021 will be the 5th year that we've used these goals. The objectives are really one-time action items that we are trying to get completed before December 31st of 2021. While the indicators are things that are metrics that are tracked over time. So we've been tracking these same metrics for the last 5 years to see how we're doing on quantitative data.
Just one comment.
Yep.
If you go back to that chart on the attract and retain workforce of excellence, I believe at the in one of our finance committee meetings, I had asked if we could add a word to that
Yep.
icon and to say attract and retain a diverse workforce of excellence. Is that possible?
Yes, and that I apologize that it got missed on this slide. It has been incorporated into the current draft of the performance plan and will be included in the one that's published. I think it's included in some of the other graphs on this in this PowerPoint. I just missed our wheel. So let me remind me to update the wheel. So thank you for that reminder. I will note too, you may notice that sometimes the goals get a different order from year to year. That's intentional. We call it spinning the wheel. We want to make the point that these goals are not ordered. They're equal goals that are important to us. And so, just because one is first in the list doesn't mean that it takes priority over the others. So periodically you will see them get shuffled up in how they get displayed and talked about. And that is intentional.
Excellent.
So in this slide, I'm not going to read all of these. You'll have a copy of this to look at. But what we did was we have 100 objectives. That's a lot. It's a lot to take in. The Park District is a very busy and complex organization. So kind of looking through those 100 objectives, we categorize them into different themes, into different buckets where they belong within these goals. So this is kind of a top 3 for each of the goals of sort of how those objectives got classified into different themes. And you can see as you read across them sort of emergent priorities. I mean, I'm calling them themes, but the areas where the Park District really wants to focus. When it comes to, just pick a few, for example, like restore, preserve, protect natural and cultural resources. That's our orange box. Many of the projects there are habitat enhancement projects, but we also have some projects that are around policy decisions and how do we communicate those. So this was just a way of sort of grouping and bucketing these work items so we can talk about them kind of in the larger context of the plan and how we want to communicate what our priorities are for a district. So this is something when we get into the board discussions, we can talk more about, but just wanted to throw it up there as an example of kind of how our different objectives get grouped into different categories. This is a slide you've seen in versions in previous presentations. It's to note that our objectives are distributed across all the divisions and all of the goals. So if you look, each of the 8 goals is distributed here in the graphs, and then each division is a different color. And so each goal has work product for each division. This is a shared resource, it's a team effort. No division is responsible for a single goal, and Kind of on the flip side, no goal is, being accomplished by one division.
Right.
The flip side of that, how to look at it, with the goals being distributed across the various divisions. I wanted to point out here, I just circled a couple of areas where you might see the bars are a little wider. And that's because we have a few extra objectives in these areas this year that kind of add emphasis. So I just wanted to highlight them. Our executive and legislative division, that's where our human resources department sits. And so we have a lot of objectives this year around internal staffing and culture, including our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, as well as HR restructuring and review of HR policies and practices. We've also got a big work item with the negotiation of the ASME contract. So a big focus this year in our human capital side of the work. In ASD, you'll see a number of projects in the light green. That's our improving access for underrepresented groups. Again, another important topic that we mentioned a little bit in our introduction. A lot of these are trail projects or ADA projects to help improve access to underserved populations. And then in FMS, as you might expect for finance, they have a large bucket for ensuring the physical health. But again, that is spread out across multiple divisions. We have some extra objectives around planning for the recession, long-term liabilities, and COVID-19 relief funding, as well as planning for funding for future climate change available. So I just wanted to highlight some of those items. Yes, Director Coffey.
Question, what is the scale here from 0 to 25 represent?
It's the number of objectives that are in each division. So the executive and legislative division, for example, has about 21 objectives for their performance plan that division is responsible for this year.
Okay.
Yes, Director Rosario.
Yeah, I love this chart because it shows how interrelated all our departments are, and well done. My one question is under ASD and improving access. How are we tracking that? Do we do like a baseline, like prior to let's say there's a trailhead improvement or new trailhead that we do? Is there a prior baseline survey done, and then the infrastructure goes in, and then do we do a follow-up to see if we've actually met our accomplishments or met our goals of actually giving the access or people using the access?
So I'll take that one. Thank you.
Go ahead.
For each of the goals, like improving access to public parklands, we have indicators. So those indicators, they range based on each of those goals, but the indicators are specific elements that we're tracking that gives us an idea of how healthy this goal is or how successful the goal is. I don't have the performance plan in front of me, but there are specific indicators that we have identified under this goal that speaks to the performance. What you're suggesting, Director Rosario, is not currently an indicator. It's not currently a practice of the Park District, but we can certainly discuss considering that to understand really, in addition to the trail markers that we have, that's one indicator, the number of visitors for the trail markers. What else can we do to start measuring increased access and who's accessing those lands?
Right.
And I know AGM Christina Kelchner is here. She would like to add anything else on that.
I know, I think we've had this discussion in legislative committee as well, because they're looking for numbers or ways to collect data as well.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Rosario and DGM Alvarez. Anna is correct that we currently, we have some trail counters, but that in general, I think across the field of park park uses, measurement of visitors and how many visitors we get is, there's not a lot of great data out there, and it can be hard data to collect. So we tend to focus on installing projects, trails, staging areas, new parks near where they'll be accessible to communities that don't have a lot of parks or have been underprivileged, underrepresented. And so that's really what we focus on. As Dr. Alvarez says, we certainly could look at additional trail counters, doing intercept surveys, which means you have somebody go out and actually interview people. It's all just a matter of time and money and investment. It's correct that Eric and his team at Legislative are looking at options to do that. And having better visitor data would help us in so many ways, but it is a pretty major undertaking and investment. So a good discussion to have.
Yeah. Thank you. Director Corbett.
Can we go back to the chart for just a moment? I have a question about the plan for climate change resiliency, and in trying to understand how to process the data. I'm just wondering, when we talk about our plan for climate change resiliency, are we just talking about how we react to, say, physical changes like sea level rise, or is this proactive? Is this also include proactive work that we do? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
I
Thank you.
know often some people only talk about what do we do because climate change is going to impact our infrastructure or shorelines. But there's the proactive approach too. And I'm just wondering if the proactive approach fits into this and how that fits into the various departments' work.
Yes, thank you, Director Corbett. The proposed climate change work that you see across in the brown bars across all divisions, most of the divisions, I should say, it's a combination of both a mitigation planning. So how do we reduce our carbon footprint, as well as adaptation strategies that proactively resolves for the anticipated vulnerabilities or anticipated impacts from a changing climate, with the intent to protect the cultural and scenic and natural resources that we steward. The body of work that's being proposed for 2021 speaks to the board's policy framework of a changing climate that has very specific categorical areas that speak both to mitigation as well as adaptation, proactively anticipating what's going to happen here and how we can best position ourselves to minimize those impacts. So it's a combination of both. I encourage you to, I welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with you to walk through the specific initiatives that are being called out for this year. We are coming back to the board executive committee in a couple of months to speak to this specific body of work, given that the board has passed very specific resolution on how to manage a changing climate or how to embed climate change in everything that we do within the park district.
Okay, thank you so much. That helps. I look forward to that.
Yeah, if I may, I think we got a glimpse of that in our liaison meeting with the city of Alameda when Brian Holt and I can't remember her name, Chantal, did their presentation on the projects.
Yes. Yes, that's a good example.
Yeah. Thank you. Director Coffey, you're pretty quiet up there. You okay? Okay.
Okay, let's see. The next piece is, and thank you, Catherine, for sharing that information. Now, in considering what may inform the performance planning process, we need to talk about the nexus to the board workshops or the board priorities. So it's important to understand that staff takes the top 3 priorities from each board member as identified in the previous year's board workshops, because they're at the front and center of this process, along with the board committee's work plans, and as well as commitments that the Park District has made to the taxpayers through parcel tax measures like Measure FF and Measure WW, amongst others. Additionally, each division identifies existing or ongoing projects that will come to fruition or may reach a significant milestone during that calendar year, as well as strategic directions to advance items of great public interest. While the 2021 performance plan currently does not speak to an issue that would take a great space within the work plan for the Natural and Cultural Resources Committee, we're going to be speaking to that as well, and it's all embedded within our intended work plan for this year. Next slide. So here's a snapshot of the board's priorities that were incorporated into this year's performance plan. As you can see, wildfire prevention and issues pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion have been incorporated. I believe in reviewing our notes from last year's workshops, we had lots of discussions pertaining to DEI, and certainly we discussed the challenges and what remains to be done here within the Park District to be able to proactively engage in field vegetation management. And also in reviewing the notes from the discussions at the last board workshop, there was a lot of discussion that came pertaining to resolving for Lake Temescal in partnership with the City of Oakland, as well as large planning efforts like participating and contributing to the preservation of open space and the development of a public park at Point Mulati, and the renovation and the future capital campaign to renovate the Tilden's Environmental Education Center. So this is just some of the highlights to give you a snapshot of how this comes together. Next slide. So in preparation for this year's board workshops, I would like to take the opportunity to share that the board members will have an opportunity to influence current and future work plans and this is done by understanding individual board members' interests with the intent to find consensus or perhaps shades of agreement, while certainly considering agency capacity to help prioritize board policy direction. We want to walk together in unison. We want to hear the priorities of the entire board, and that can only be done by communicating and discussing individual board interests. So this year's first board workshops, or the first board workshop is tentatively scheduled for Friday, February the 26th at Lake Temescal. And I have asked our CFO, Ms. Deborah Acker, to assist us again, to assist me in helping facilitating this year's workshops. She really enjoys that process, and she's a great partner to me as well as to the board. So we're looking forward to engaging in that conversation. And this is the best opportunity to understand how those things come together in getting you ready for the conversations on the 26th. And understanding that the 2020 unprecedented COVID pandemic upended our planning efforts to have board workshop number 2, which is where we have a really deep dive or a study session on key priority areas for the board. We want to do that. We want to host that workshop, and it's already tentatively scheduled for the end of March, on March the 26th. So with that, if there's no other questions, that concludes the presentation.
Great. I love this present. I wish I would have had this presentation when I first started as a board member. It would have helped greatly. I felt like a lot of times I was just throwing spaghetti on the wall to see what sticks. But no, this is fabulous. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
Thank you. You know, Director Osorio, in response to that comment, as Catherine and I were putting together the presentation, in full disclosure, the last slide was because I remember at the last board workshop, Director Coffey asking the question, so how does this work? And how do we get my interest into the performance plan?
Yeah.
So that's why we did it this way.
No, I think this is, this presentation should be included in every orientation for future board members.
Great suggestion.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine.
Director Corbett.
I would like to agree with the president. It is just reflecting back over the last 4 years. It is very interesting when you first and also including the comments of Director Coffey. It is very interesting when you first are introduced to our workshops. It's very hard to tell where you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to interact with the district. And that's not a knock on the district, but there's just so many things. So it's very nice to have this sort of set of places to start from that are developed from input from the board in recognition of what's going on in the world around us and in the park district around us. So I also believe that this is a really nice guidepost for us to do some significant policy work, as is the role of the board. And I certainly appreciate the way this presentation, the tone of this presentation as well today, because it appears to be quite inclusive of giving the board the tools to be successful throughout the year and actually have some parameters that we can work from. I know too, in the processes in the board workshops, that often it sort of starts with, well, what do you want to do? And when it's that wide open, you know, of course, we're always, even without that question, we're always going to have lots of ideas. But if it's just so wide open without sort of a plan, it's hard to focus in and have the board be able to work on issues that are of interest to individual board members, impact their individual districts, allow them to really look with an equity lens as to how we provide resources across the district. So I'm very appreciative of this. And I wanted to add, I don't know if this is the right time, but I wanted to just throw a couple other things out there. I don't know if these can be added here or discussed at another time. And this is something that several board members have talked about in the past. And that's that piece of how to support the board members in interacting with their communities, their constituents, their local officials. I'll give you an example. One thing that I'm very interested in, since I have so much shoreline in my district, is to be able to interact with various different organizations and public groups, friends of groups, people who have sprung up around the idea of addressing climate change and being concerned about what is going to happen to our shorelines up and down the San Francisco Bay. And I'd like to be able to engage in more conversations so I can share with them the good work of the district and also bring things back. And the framework has been difficult for that in the last 4 years. So I don't know if I'm asking too much, but I would like to be able to spin off on something obviously that seems of interest to the board and be able to have more support in, you know, presenting the face of the park district to the public on the good things that we do. And on that issue in particular. So I'm hoping that that's something that we can discuss as we're discussing our plans as well.
If I may, Director Corbett.
Yes, please.
Those conversations are best had in the board workshops, absolutely. So I encourage you to bring forward the advocacy for moving a process or a system to be able to support that speaks to the interest that you just mentioned, because that's where you can engage in a genuine conversation with other board members as well as staff, executive staff, to be able to understand what is needed and how can we best support and what is the priorities if there's overall interest by the entire board.
Okay. And then one other item that is more, I don't know if it's an HR issue or what. We have had discussions about creating job descriptions or definitions of some of our management roles. because the board is engaged in evaluations. Particularly, I would zero in on the general manager, and there have been discussions about developing a specific job description as we see in other districts. So that when it does come time to play our role in evaluation, we have something to, we have something real to evaluate against. So I don't know if that fits on this list or should be part of a discussion at a workshop, but I just wanted to throw that out as something that I don't see here. Maybe it belongs somewhere else.
Interim.
IGM. IGM.
Hi, Director Corbett. So I think with regards to the general manager, we currently do have a job description for the general manager. It is in need of an update.
Update.
The board will also recall that we had a ad hoc committee on transition that had developed but not completed a general manager performance evaluation process. And so I think in terms of that ad hoc committee has, I think is disbanded for all intents and purposes, and perhaps it makes sense to bring it here to executive committee to finalize that that policy on general manager evaluation and to work on the description.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other board comments on that?
I don't see any.
Okay, so we'll bring that back for a future executive committee, and it would be good for the board to get something in place around the time that a new general manager is being hired. But the board may in fact want the new general managers to put on the evaluation process.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, timing,
Okay.
because of timing. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Great. So are we finished with item number 4?
I have a quick presentation question.
Okay. Go ahead.
So,
Kathy.
Anna, you were discussing performance indicators and mentioned FF, and it triggered in my mind, how are we approaching performance goals set forth for projects under WW? If that isn't something we do annually, like with FF or the other performance indicators that were in the presentation, I know we do it because I'm recalling some meetings at which compliance with WW goals was presented, and it just occurs to me that given, what do we have, 7 more years of life on that that measure, that we would be at this juncture wanting some assessment of how successful we have been or will be with the WW goals, such that if and when the district goes out for another similar measure, you can do what we did last time and tout the success of the application of the funds raised. So I'm just wondering how WW is handled.
Thank you, Director Coffey. So if the Park District reports out to the community in its annual community report that are done at the end of the year, we speak on the achievements and accomplishments of the commitments that were made under WW or Measure FF, or even at times Measure AA. And depending on the commitment that we made, you will have a different metric. To give you an idea, if the goal was to acquire so many acres of land, we keep that tally and we keep informing the public, this is how much we've done. But there's also an opportunity, to your point, to engage in a big community disclosure or reporting out when we're getting ready for the sunset of each of the bond measures. We did that with Measure CC, if you recall, and we do have midpoints or points throughout the life of the measure where we're understanding how we're progressing and advancing, because our goal is certainly to deliver on those commitments.
Excellent question.
Okay, one last, in terms of the presentation, the start of that presentation, the jumping point for that presentation is the 8-point performance goals of the master plan of 2013. At what point do we, at the governance level and management level, start thinking about the next master plan and the next master planning process? We're getting into the wording of those performance goals, which just triggered the thought that, you know, there's going to be an opportunity to totally redo them at some point. And I'm wondering what that point's going to be in management's thinking.
Thank you, Director Coffey. That's a great segue for the next item on your agenda. It's a great bridge. But typically, master plans should be updated every 10 years. That's a good, healthy marker. In the district, we have engaged already. We began conversations of what would that look like. We're beginning conversations at the executive level. This is something definitely that the board executive committee may want to consider, start understanding. But there's a lot on the plate for 2021, as you just saw. And now, as we're going to go into the board executive committee work plan, you will see that there's additional pieces there, very significant policy considerations. And the master plan was not included, by the way, which we can talk in a minute. But we have redistricting coming our way. We certainly have the need to update our master plan, and we're in transition. We need our general manager, our board, to be able to engage in that specific endeavor. So it's certainly something of great substance and interest, not only to the board, but staff and the public in general. Carol?
Yes, on that point, Director Coffey. So our master plan was adopted in 2013, and it was, and we did a number of public meetings throughout 2012. So I think we're really, as Dr. Ana Alvarez pointed out, you're raising this question at, I think, the exact right time. And we are, and as we go over the work plan for this committee, one of the big pieces of work that's being done, will be done through the executive committee and the board of directors, is our community engagement and our community outreach. And making sure that we are reaching all members of our community. And so that work is going forward in this year, and it will be an ongoing, it's not one and done, but we're really concentrating on that this year. And I think that will form a really nice framework to start the public meeting process on the master plan in 2022 to 2023, with a goal of looking at a new master plan in either 2023 or 2024. So I think we have, we're learning to listen better, I think, through the process that staff is undertaking right now to all of our communities, and that will inform the planning process. So I think this is all lining up pretty neatly in terms of a master plan review.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. With that, are we ready for item number 4? Executive Committee Work Plan.
Yes, thank you, Director. Thank you, President Rosario. Deputy General Manager, Dr. Ana Alvarez, at your service. The item before you is the board's executive committee work plan, which has been developed based on priorities identified by last year's board workshops and previous year's performance plans. Understanding that additional items may be based on operational need and interest from committee members, the plan before you includes approximately 40, and after this conversation, perhaps 42 items categorized under policy considerations, planning endeavors, capital projects, and other items of administrative nature. In the spirit of transparency and shared understanding by members of the public, staff, and committee members, I would like to take a few minutes to highlight some of these items. I'm going to share my screen with you if you don't mind, and I will welcome the opportunity to engage in a discussion with the committee as we review those categorical areas. So let me share my screen. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we have under policy considerations, we have about 8 large ticket items, for lack of a better word, not including the planning for redistricting, which, understanding the timelines, it may be that by April of 2021, we may have census information, but it will not incorporate precinct populations. So it's still a moving target. And that's why it's not incorporated here, but we need to make space. And also the master plan that Director Coffey just discussed, it might be something that we can begin to plan. But as you can see, what's before you for 2021 is the board operating guidelines from the last conversation from the last year's board executive committee. There was an ad hoc committee that was formed with the participation of President Rosario and Director Corbett to update and review our board operating guidelines. And we typically do that every 2 years, and we're a little bit behind. That's going to take multiple, it's a large body of work, and it's going to have to come forward to this committee multiple times throughout the year. And also we have an update pertaining to the process in naming Concord Hills Park. That's another big policy consideration. And perhaps that may even, the conversations and one of the outcomes may be that the board may want to consider looking at its park naming policy, because we have a great opportunity to address some issues as we look at our policies through an equity lens and be able to resolve for some issues pertaining to the management and naming of ancestral lands. I didn't put that in the work plan because that needs to be decided by the committee, but those are the types of examples, if we engage in a conversation as the items come forward, on how this work plan may expand. So there's a little bit of space. And certainly a big highlight for this year is the body of work that will be done pertaining to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have 2 big ticket items. One is the organizational assessment that we've engaged on, understanding our hiring and retention practices and policies. So it's a very large policy work, and we're going to be coming back to you to give you an update where we are and what may be coming forward. Hopefully we'll finish that work in 2021, but it may carry to 2022. And then the second piece is the community impact assessment. That's an area that we need to engage in per the board's interest in your resolution, to be able to understand with an equity lens, what is the impact that we're having, particularly in communities of color or marginalized communities in terms of mission delivery. That speaks to things like not only programmatic services, but also the investment of public dollars in building programmatic infrastructure or staging areas to access public lands, those types of things. And that's another major undertaking in terms that will guide and will inform additional policy work. And certainly, as it is our commitment, we will be coming back to this board committee to present the findings and for the 2020-21 Equal Employment Commission Diversity Report that will also guide and inform additional body of work in policy. And as we just had a conversation regarding the policy framework for managing cultural and park resources in a changing climate, we made a public commitment. The board of directors has given policy direction. And so we're responding to that policy direction through that resolution to say these are the activities or the endeavors that we're undertaking to be able to follow your policy direction. So that's another item that we will bring back to this committee in the third or fourth quarter. Additional policy considerations is certainly the executive committee engages in a conversation with staff pertaining to what are the goals and priorities for the Parks Advisory Committee that has a governance role in and informs some of the decisions that are made by this committee and the board of directors. I'm going to stop there in case you would like to engage in a conversation in this categorical area, or if there's any questions before I go to the next one.
Looks pretty good so far.
Yeah. So, and what's not here that it's under administrative items, another big ticket is we're going to be doing a lot of work to update the Park District's personnel administrative manual. That's a very important policy document that guides the policies and practices for work conditions and how we distribute benefits and promotions and other types of personnel administrative policy considerations. Next is what we call planning. Under the categorical theme of planning, traditionally we understand it as land use planning, but this is more than land use planning. This is the approval and review of preservation management plans. This is also planning for a change in climate adaptation strategies, or even planning in other themes or in other areas. A big component of that for this year, which we're very excited and we already made references to it, is the Bay Trail risk assessment, understanding what are the risk and vulnerabilities and the priorities for adaptation for sea level rise along the Bay Trail for the portions that are owned and managed by the Park District. So along 55 miles of shoreline, what are the key priorities? Then certainly the transfer of almost 45 or 46 acres of land for the development of a new campground, Dumbarton Quarry Campground. That's a fundamental and a watershed moment for the district. We would like to hear, and ASD will be bringing forward an informational update pertaining to the Habitat Conservancy Preservation Management Plan, which guides the opening and triggers the opportunities to open banked land, public lands that would ensure recreational access, which is an important component of our strategy. Other pieces here that are ready to bring forward include the Southern Las Trampas Land Use Plan Amendment. The last time we discussed this was in 2019. It's ripe to come back to the board executive committee. Last year, we also spent some time understanding the Hayward Marsh Restoration Plan, as well as the Jewel Lake Restoration Study. Those are very important planning documents that we must complete to be able to move forward in protecting and restoring the lands as the climate continues to change. And then there's certainly the opportunity to understand a conceptual plan for a new staging area, and depending where we are pertaining to our regulatory permits at Tyler Ranch, which is another board priority of great interest to the board that has come forward multiple times across multiple years. And then there's the Crowley property, which was leased from the Port of Oakland through a 99-year lease, trying to preserve the last viewpoint to the bay in that developed shoreline. And we would like to come back to you to give you an update where we are in terms of creating that additional staging area. Are there any questions regarding planning items? Yes, Director Coffey. And then Director Corbett.
Okay, I'm sorry, my space bar wasn't releasing the mute for some reason. So on the planning items, remind me again where Tyler Ranch is?
Tyler Ranch is by Pleasanton Ridge, in that area. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, now I recall. What I was expecting to see here under planning items based on periodic review of these planning lists that we have been given, I expected to see Clayton Ranch, Black Diamond on this list. The board was taken on a field trip to see the future staging area location across from Morgan Territory Road and off Marsh Creek. And at that point, the Clayton Ranch Black Diamond planning process was moving forward, and I think that was in anticipation, that field trip in anticipation of us getting there. It's been trailing then. It's fallen off this list for the last several years. And originally I was told that was because the planner, you know, our planner left for UC Berkeley work. And that it just fell behind. But I'm just sensing it's continuing to fall behind its original schedule as it was described to me some years ago.
Yes, no, thank you, Director Coffey. I'm going to tell you exactly what Brian Holt, our chief of planning, told me when I brought I had the same question as we were preparing this presentation. And he, in a very kind way, he says, Anna, we're rescoping the preserve management plan. We're rescoping what that looks like. We understand it's a priority. We understand that it's trailing behind, but we made a decision not to include it here until we finalize the rescoping. But it doesn't mean that it will not be heard in 2020 or 2021. And it doesn't mean that we cannot have a conversation to understand what's been happening with the Black Diamond Mines land use plan amendment as part of our board workshops. We can ask them to give us an update. We can ask them to help us understand where we are in terms of delivery and timelines, and the reasons behind having to rescope that preserve management plan.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like Christina Kelchner has her hand up.
Yes, thank you, Director Rosario. And Director Coffey, I would like to schedule a meeting with you that Brian and I can go over it with you. It is bound up with the preserve management plans and the HCP. And so that really is the core of the cause of the delay. And so it's complicated, and I'd like to kind of walk through it with you and some of the different strategies that we might have. Part of the challenge is how much do we get done all together versus how much do we take the pieces, which then may be able to move forward independently. So Clayton Ranch is not in the HCP, but a lot of the Black Diamond Mines property is within the HCP. And so there are some different strategies about how we move those things forward. And I would love to get a meeting on the calendar with you to go over that.
That'd be terrific. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Director Corbett.
Thank you very much. I think this is a really great list, and a lot of the projects are sort of big overarching issues. So I'm looking forward to moving through all of these this year. The one thing I would ask about real quickly, and then I'm going to jump off the line just for a little bit to go over to EOC and then come back maybe, is the issue that you discussed, Anna, about equity in the delivery of resources, both in projects and programs. Very much supportive of that. But I just wanted to express, it would be helpful to have information provided to the board that allows us to, sort of define our look at how we do that in an equitable fashion. It's sort of difficult sometimes. In fact, do you mind putting the screen down?
Not at all.
It's difficult sometimes with the information that's presented to us to sort of, evaluate the equitable delivery of resources and programs, because we have so many other things we need to look at, like, where's the WW money? Is FF going that way? We have our regions that we look at. But on those maps that we're looking at from time to time, we don't necessarily have even city boundaries sometimes. Of course, we all kind of have an idea of that in our head, and we don't have the data or information as to the communities and, the data that would help us make good decisions with regard to equity, or even to know sometimes, again, we're most familiar with our own districts, but to know, where facilities are, right? Some areas have newer facilities, some have older facilities. Do you know what I mean? So
Yes.
it'd be great to have, maybe we can work on making a list at some time, different bits of information that will help us as we move forward in looking at the equitable delivery of resources.
Yes, thank you, Director Corbett. It's a very critical body of work for the district, and a rather complex matter, as you just described. So the district will be, with the support of the board, availing itself of a planning firm that are subject matter experts in this area that can follow evidence-based practices on how to best carry out an assessment that gives us the data that we're looking for, in addition to identifying potential recommendations on how to move forward if there's an opportunity for growth and improvement. So similar to what we did in the organizational assessment, we're currently conducting a review of best practices in this area, following the guidelines from the National Parks and Recreation Association, so that we can conduct this work carefully, thoughtfully, and inclusively of everyone who has a stakeholder in that, not only is perhaps being impacted, but also who are responsible for making the decisions in how we make those planning and service delivery decisions. So you'll be hearing a lot more from Catherine and I, who are leading this body of work.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'll be back in a little bit.
Okay. Have fun.
So I'm going to put back this screen because I think it's important for the public to see,
Yes.
in case they don't have the document. So those are the planning items. The executive committee, by definition of function in the board operating guidelines, this is the committee where we make decisions pertaining to capital projects. So there are 5 capital projects that will be coming to you. The first one and foremost is the renovation of Parrata Oaks North building. That small little building that's sitting next to our headquarters that we purchased about a year ago. Just that little building that we need to resolve for. We'll be coming back to give an update where we are. And I'm very glad to know, you should know that the structure that Bob Dell and I put in place to make those decisions is working very well. And we will be coming to you multiple times this year so that we can continue moving that project forward. Also, there's the items such as the McKay Avenue GSA property at Grand Beach. We're looking at how do we expand in that area? What are the alternatives? And we have some additional informational updates pertaining to we're almost at the end, the completion of the Dunbarton Quarry campground that includes the service yard. So those are the things that you will be seeing. It may be that staff may come back if it's a safety item, or we see some damages from storms, or there's unplanned work that we may need to address. We're leaving space for that as well. Like it happened in 2017. We did a lot of work responding to the storm systems then. Additional items, if there's no questions on capital, I can move on to additional items, just to give you a couple of, highlight a couple of the pieces. Our relationship with the Regional Parks Foundation, such a critical partnership. It is through the board executive committee that we reinforce those linkages in that partnership by understanding their accomplishments. So our AGM of Public Affairs, who also serves as executive director for the Regional Parks Foundation, will be coming next meeting, hopefully, to give you a report for 2020. We also have the community engagement strategy that interim general manager Victor made reference on earlier in our meeting. That can be the beginning of the pre-work that needs to be done pertaining to our master planning process. And that's a beautiful body of work that will be also very critical and that will inform the DEI community impact assessment because it speaks to public engagement at all levels and inclusive of communities of colors or disenfranchised communities that we're trying to bring to the center of the Park District. Throughout the years, the board's executive committee has asked that we bring forward. This is the place where we discuss the management of one of our most critical resources, our people. So the Department of Human Resources will be coming in front of you to share with you, to provide you with informational updates ranging from the reorganization that we're embarking on. Actually, Deborah Acker couldn't be here today with us because she's helping me by interviewing candidates for the Chief Human Resources Officer position.
Okay.
So those are very critical positions, very critical landmark decisions, and we'll be coming back to the board executive committee to share with you where we are. The performance plan you heard today will be back in mid-year to tell you how we're doing in meeting those objectives that we set forth, those 100 objectives that Catherine just spoke about. And then certainly a big ticket item is the lease renewal for Mission Peak. This is the year to take on that lease. It expired in 2020. There's a big body of work in that, and you're going to be hearing that in the second quarter. And then one piece that's very important to the public, of great public interest, is disclosing and sharing with the public the work that has been done pertaining to safe and healthy forests. That speaks to fuel vegetation management, but it also speaks to restoration. And going back to the original question that Director Coffey asked, what are the indicators and how do we communicate the delivery of those public commitments that are attached to those bond measures? And this is one of those opportunities. We publicly disclose the work that was accomplished, and also the work that is being planned for this year and the coming year in terms of recommended treatment areas and also any restorative activities. So that's work that's being done primarily mostly by the fire department, but there's a piece of stewardship that will be coming to you as well. And then we have the asset management systems. Every year, the board executive committee reviews the work that has been completed pertaining to our major infrastructure asset inventory. That includes our pavement program, as well as perhaps an opportunity to share with you the capital projects that were completed under finance and management services. Because as you know, capital resides not only in design and construction under the division of acquisition, stewardship, and development, but capital also resides under finance management services and certainly under operations, under MAST. So all of the capital program for the district are under those three divisions, and we would like to give an opportunity to bring forward general pieces in addition to what you will be hearing as part of the board workshops for our capital programs. So the Park District is a very complex and a very, very complex organization, and certainly very diverse in its undertakings and endeavors. So this is, again, just a snapshot, 42 items that are coming in front of you. And Director Rosario, this is an informational item.
Yes.
It's to engage in a conversation.
Mhm.
We do have space to add things as they may come up. And then I'm open for any questions. And I see our general manager turn on her video in case you want to add or, well, not delete, but certainly perhaps add.
Oh, we should definitely add, to what we have to do.
I suspect there's a few legal policies that will also be coming forward that aren't reflected on this list. And we do want to leave space for the committee to to address other issues as they come up through the year, as they know. But this process of setting a work plan, I think Jim O'Connor was the author of it, perhaps, and Deborah Ocker in finance and operations. And really, when your executive team was having a discussion, looking at all the work we have to do the year ahead, and also keeping in mind of last year, which was a COVID response year, and by necessity, and that continues to be a huge priority. But there was a lot of business of the district that got delayed, and so we knew this was a busy year. So this was giving us a work plan. Some of it might be a little aspirational. This might be too ambitious, but it's going to help shape the work of the executive committee and your staff. And I do want to say that Anna, you did a beautiful job of both describing and putting this forward. It really does reflect the work of the entire executive team as well.
Great. Director Coffey, comments or questions?
Well, I think Carol was just putting her finger on one of my thoughts, and that is that there's nowhere in this plan for dealing with the transition that we're undergoing. And it seems, it's been mentioned, we talk about it. We will have a new general manager. And with that becomes an opportunity to, from management's perspective, for the board to tinker around with the management. And from our point of view, taking it as an opportunity to look at your basic organizational chart, for instance. So I think that we will be doing some of that as a natural progression of this transition that we're going through. And maybe it should be an actual line item in our work plan, since it's going to be there. I mean, one of the issues that has come up and we talk about occasionally is who exactly should this general counsel report to, right? We've all had those conversations, and that's just one of them, right? And it's an opportunity that's just going to be there, whether you label it governance transition, management transition, or just things we should talk about in connection with having a new general manager. I see it as being here, something that this committee is, we're the equivalent of a governance committee that other public agencies, or certainly nonprofits that I work for, have governance committees. So this is our equivalent, and it seems to me to be a significant item that should be here.
Great.
In terms of some of those issues will come up in the board operating guidelines, but Director Coffey, I agree with you that I think near board operating guidelines, we should put East Bay Regional Park District General Manager transition, something in that, because.
Because I see that as, the ad hoc committees, every organization every couple of years wants to review its bylaws, right?
Yes.
Those are our bylaws.
Right.
And that's a much broader issue, and frankly, not as heavy a priority as these specific issues that have to deal with this major transition at the senior management.
Yes, thank you for the feedback. There's a lot of nodding our heads, but yes, we will certainly make that amendment.
And I think I've certainly let the board know that I think that the board should hire their general counsel, but that is the board's decision. And we should set it for an agenda to have an informed discussion about it.
Yeah. That's our ad hoc committee is definitely part of our one of the items on amending the operating guidelines. And I just wanted to be, because both Ellen and I, Director Corbett and I, felt that the board operating guidelines deserves a separate workshop so that we can have a full board discussion. I was wondering if you thought that was doable.
So I think in terms of, I think that having a workshop for the board operating guidelines, and I think there's some other policy work that the one item that I know that probably should be on the executive committee was the compensable meetings discussion.
Uh-huh.
Meetings of the board should be compensable. And we had a discussion in February of last year with the board of directors. We didn't achieve consensus, and then the shelter in place order took place, and a lot of other priorities came forward. So I see that one, and the board operating guidelines would be excellent topics for some kind of workshop. Where it's more informal and more back and forth, and you're not feeling the other pressure of a public meeting and business that needs to take
Yeah.
place.
We would both like that. If we can make that happen on both of those issues, that would be great.
Yeah.
And then the only thing I wanted to question is, I know I had heard in the past that once the, what is that? Oh, the Dunbarton Quarry Service Yard was completed. We would start planning and building the Point Pinole Service Yard. Is that still online, or is that correct?
That's a great question, President Rosario. There's multiple service yards. There's a great need for service yards. And what we have identified the need, I can't say that one would trigger the other. So I see that Christina Kelchner turned on her video. Maybe she can add that.
Certainly, it's on the list. So we are definitely still planning to move forward with that. The plan has been to complete the service yard at Dunbarton Quarry first, and then to take that template and that blueprint and what we learned from that as the standard for service yards. And so then we'll be ready to move on to Point Pinole next. And we are moving forward with the Dunbarton Quarry Service Yard. We have an item coming to the board, I think at the next board meeting. So we can give you an update then on that schedule, where we are with that.
Great, that's good to hear. Point Pinole has been waiting decades.
Yes, it has. Badly needed, I understand.
Yes. Okay, I think those are all my questions. Again, thank you so much. Is there more? Did we?
No, Director Rosario, there's no more. That's plenty.
It's enough.
Yes, I think we have our work cut out for us, and I appreciate all the efforts. Oh, I see Director Corbett is back online, and let's see if she has anything to add or would like to add to this list.
I don't know what your list is, so I will just on blind faith say, I'm sure you did a good job of making it.
Okay. I think we got a kind of consensus that 2 separate workshops for one for the compensable benefits to the board of directors, and then the other issue of the board operating guidelines.
Yeah.
Separate workshops. Yes.
And Director Rosario, the compensable meetings can probably be tacked on as another workshop issue. I don't think that's going to be,
Okay.
That shouldn't be, that. Hopefully that's not the most challenging part. I think the board operating guidelines just is such a comprehensive document, and it covers so many governance issues for this agency. That one, I think you could have a very substantive workshop on that, standalone workshop on that.
Okay. Great.
I will ask a question about that.
Yes.
So are we talking about the regular board workshops, and these are subject matters for it, or a standalone workshop?
I think with the board operating guidelines, we may be discussing, and I think we'll know more as the ad hoc committee starts reviewing and how comprehensive of an update we're doing on the board operating guidelines. But Director Rosario was suggesting that the board operating guidelines be reviewed in a workshop setting whether that's how much time we need, I think we can see once we know how comprehensive the updates are going to be. But it might be independent of the other workshops.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
I would prefer to have it independent. That way it would impact the other workshop.
Yeah, I think that sounds good too.
Yeah, great. And then let me know if this is out of line or if it needs to go to another committee. But I was thinking of, the Park District has not participated in the Oakland Pride Parade or the officially Pride Month. And where can I bring that up? Is that here or in another committee?
I think, if I may, Carol, I think those are great topics of discussion and interest that can be discussed in the first board workshop that is scheduled a couple of weeks from now, so that you can benefit from having a conversation with the board members and staff.
Great. Excellent. Thank you. Anything else from the board members?
Some good news. I just saw in an email that our nation is now once again a member of the Paris Accord, and the Keystone XL project permit has been canceled. So as of right now, there's been a lot of environmental justice served in just the last few hours.
Great. If we have concluded with item number 4, we do have a public comment. He's been patiently waiting.
Director Rosario, we have a couple of members on the public. The first person who I will call is Ed Martin. So Ed, if you can turn on your video and unmute yourself, please.
Hi, I'm in transit, and so I will turn on my video for a moment. But I know in a moving car, doing video in a moving car can be a little disorienting. So I will stop my video.
Crash.
Okay, and I'm just going to read the email that I wrote, just because it contains all my points and I won't forget anything. So if you'll indulge me. Good afternoon, directors and the East Bay Park staff and members of the public. My name is Ed Martin from Pleasant Hill, and I represent a constituency from Pleasant Hill, Walnut Creek, Lafayette, and Martinez. Our group are a group of fathers, husbands, hikers, and avid mountain bikers, and we regularly ride at a variety of East Bay parks, including Briones, Crockett Hills, Las Trampas, Pleasanton Ridge, and Del Val. We are also representative of a sport that has grown substantially in the last few years. Forbes has written that mountain biking trail usage has increased 100% to 500% on most trails in the last year alone. And as part of the sport's growth, mountain bike technology has also increased dramatically, allowing more riders to improve their skills much faster. Those two factors have resulted in some unfavorable outcomes at our beloved East Bay Regional Parks. The current sanctioned trail system within the East Bay Parks target beginner riders and are limited compared to the number of trails available in the parks. The lack of legal access to trails has caused an increase of illegal trail use, as well as the proliferation of unofficial trails built. Hiker and equestrian complaints about mountain bikers have increased, as well as the number of citations issued to mountain bikers. We believe that the approach to solve these problems is by working to advocate for more equitable access and sustainable trail maintenance and building in the East Bay Parks. There are numerous examples in California and Oregon of mountain biking advocacy groups that have done this successfully, such as the Mountain Bikers of Santa Cruz, the Folsom Auburn Trail Riders Action Coalition, the Redwood Empire Mountain Bike Alliance, and the Boy Scouts at Camp Camarancho in Marin County. And even within the East Bay Parks, the Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay has in the past worked with Crockett Hills to support mountain biking trails in that park. We are passionate about our sport and our East Bay Regional Parks, and we would love to work with you in finding an equitable and sustainable approach to increase trail access. We would all gladly volunteer help fundraise and educate and advocate for mountain biking, and would like the opportunity to work with East Bay Parks. Our question to the board is, who should we be engaging with within the East Bay Parks region to discuss the current policies and practices, and help collaborate on the ways to increase mountain biking trail access that's safe, sustainable, and equitable? Thank you for your consideration.
Great. Thank you for your advocacy. Do we have someone who can answer that or follow up with Mr. Martin?
Working group.
Yeah. Christina Kelchner.
Yes, thank you, Director Rosario. Mr. Martin, thank you so much for being here and for your comments. If you can get your information to, I believe we have an email, so I will have someone on my team get back to you. Again, my name is Christina Kelchner. I'm the Assistant General Manager, and my group is leading a Trails User Working Group to talk about these issues. And we have had meetings with a lot of different trail user groups in the past, and those are ongoing. So I'm happy to have someone on my team follow up with you.
Fantastic, and I love your background.
Ed should check out the website dedicated to the working group. I just looked at it the other day. It's got tons of information and background, and I referred one of Ed's colleagues to Devin in your department, who is staffing the Trail Users Working Group, I believe.
Correct.
Devin's
Correct.
a good source.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Coffey.
Great. Madam Secretary, do we have another?
Yes, I see someone by the name of Darren Roston. Mr. Roston, would you like to speak?
Hello?
Hi, welcome. You're on.
I'm not sure if you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. Hello?
Hello,
We can
you're on.
hear you and see you.
Okay. Hi, my name's Darren Roston. I work as a firefighter here within the county, and I'm a good friend of Ed Martin's. And I will not be as eloquent and thoughtful as he is, but I just wanted to express my support of the things that he said, and I'll be brief with this statement. Is that I was recently advised by an East Bay Regional Parks police officer that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I plan on getting a little squeaky occasionally. So I don't know where we're starting, and I don't know where we can go from here, but I think that there is a large group of mountain bikers who would love to start getting engaged in the process. So after Ed gets that information, expect a large amount of us to start getting involved in the process. After hearing this meeting, you guys have a lot on your plates, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate the work that goes into that. And I know that the things that I want done within the parks are a very, very small piece of the larger park process, and I can appreciate that. But those are very important to the people and the people among me. So with that being said, thank you for your time, and I look forward to having more contact with you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your advocacy and for your service. Much appreciated. Director Coffey.
So Darren's the one I was referring to now that I've seen Darren. So I sent Darren yesterday, if Darren, you want to check your email, the link to the working group page, site page that I was referring to. And again, there's tons of information on the work that we're doing on conflicting trail use and how everyone's trying to get on the same page.
Or the same trail.
Yeah, more accurate.
Madam Secretary, do we have any other public comments?
I see a Mr. Greg Sawyer. Mr. Sawyer, would you like to make a public comment?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just in the same group with the other two, Darren and Ed, and there's a whole bunch more of us. So we just want to work together with you guys to share the land with everybody that enjoys it. And so I'm just in here listening in, and just like to echo what Darren said about the enormity of what you guys do. And we really appreciate all the hard work and sacrifice you put into having our open spaces available to us. And we just like to pitch in and make it a little more usable for our mountain bike friends. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
I see someone with the initials by the name of with NS. If you would like to speak, can you please identify yourself and unmute yourself? Going once, going twice. And that's all that I have on my screen.
Great. That concludes the public comments section. And now we're at item 6, board comments. Director Coffey, we'll start with you.
Oh, I've commented enough. Thank you. I'm done for the afternoon.
Director Corbett.
I still have a few more comments, as usual. I just wanted to really thank everyone for the work that went into the presentations today.
Yes.
It's really nice to have the plans, the executive board plan, and then the overall plan. Both of those, we really have a lot of great work to do in the upcoming year. I think that, and just reflecting on today, well, let me say this first. I was particularly touched when Catherine Dudney was talking about how our wonderful staff had to adjust to the world that was happening around us last year, and did so with such professionalism and such grace as we moved around resources and people's workloads. I think we could be very proud of the year that we had last year, in spite of all the challenges. So I wanted to touch on that real briefly. So thank you once again to everyone for, it was a crazy year, but I think a year we can be proud of at the Park District. And then just to reflect on today, just briefly, it is so nice, and Director Coffey, you touched on this, it is so nice to see a peaceful transition of government, and really appreciate the fact that there's more focus being turned to issues of the environment and equity, and many of the same things we're talking about here at the Park District were mentioned today. It was quite an impressive and a moving thing to watch today, all of the various presentations and wonderful speeches and etc. So just happy to be from the Bay Area and proud of the Bay Area representation that was on that stage today, and the California presentation. California was alive and well in Washington, D.C. today. So we're just a little piece of that, but it's good to see it happening. And that's it for me.
Great. And then let's see. I just wanted to update everyone from the Legislative Committee. We asked Carol, our interim general manager, to do a resolution to condemn the activities that happened, the seditious activity that happened on January 6th. So we'll be working on that. And I was wondering if we could work on also a resolution we never really had an opportunity to thank our firefighters, park rangers, and police officers after our horrendous fire season last year. I think a resolution of thanks and appreciation would be something that's overdue, and I would certainly want to do and recognize all their work. So so hopefully we can do that too. Great. And so yes.
Didn't I just see you guys?
I think our all of our frontline staff has, I think, just worked under difficulty and as someone described, professionally
Yes.
and nimbly. And I think that, and they're still doing, COVID isn't over and the parks are still busier than ever. And in recognition from the board would be greatly appreciated. And so we'll bring something forward.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Alvarez.
Yes, and if I may suggest that that we can broaden the recognition to not only fall in the fire season, but also the COVID-19 pandemic, the wind event, the power outages. I mean, you have a list of things, and and our staff continue to deliver every day. So that would be very, very welcome. Very appreciative.
And in anticipation of, I think we're going to have an early fire season.
Well,
As we saw what happened in Santa Cruz. I mean, those fires are not out yet. So let's hopefully everybody's getting an opportunity to rest. I know people in the field don't have much, but hopefully what time they have, I hope they can take. So with that, let's celebrate our great country, our democracy, and we're still there. So thank you all very much. Great presentations on all fronts. Thank you. All right. With that, we are adjourned.
Fine. Thank you.